Hello, welcome to the first maths lecture of the year. These are going to take place on a Thursday evening throughout the first semester and the second semester, like they usually do. And this year we've changed a little bit and we've themed the lecture series Anti-Apathetic Architecture. And the idea is that we're asking our speakers to talk about architects and architectural ideas that both reflect on and challenge how architects work in the current political, economic, environmental, and social context that we're situated in. So we have a range of speakers, some people who are educators, some people are architects, some people are thinking very broadly about how we can do architecture differently, and some people have been practicing for many, many years. And today we have our own Tony Fretton, who's going to give a lecture on Lina Bo Bardi, the Italian-born Brazilian architect. I think that's all I need to say, and I'll let Tony take it away.
This Lina Bo Bardi was practicing in a time when the issues that you're describing were not even on the horizon. I have to say that it was post-war architecture with a large social agenda in a third world country, using lots and lots of concrete. I want you to recognize that that was kind of innocence from society. And concrete construction was seen as, in Brazil, was seen as socially important. It was made by hand labor. Bo Bardi was a socialist, wealthy, but she was a socialist. And in lots of post-war buildings used concrete as an emblem of a new world of large-scale social products. And we have to think about that. The question now is, what can we do? What kind of expression can be made with the appropriate materials of these times? That's in my unit, that's what we should be striving for. We shouldn't fall back onto concrete, we shouldn't fall back onto brick. We should look hard at how the energy materials can be used in a heroic way. So I ask you to understand this presentation in that sense. As was said, Lina Bo Bardi was Italian, and in Italy she was Lina Bo. She married Pietro Bardi and Lina Bo Bardi. They emigrated from Italy just after the Second World War. She was, to some extent, lying low. I mean, it was fascist regime until 1944 in Italy. So she was involved in publications. I think, like a lot of people in an oppressive moment, she did what she could. She wasn't a resistance fighter. Other people were, but she was in resistance, you might say. And I think moving to Brazil, I assume moving to Brazil was a way of getting rid of everything that Europe had become at the time, and going to a country which seemed to offer a promise. And in fact, for a long period of time in Brazil, until the middle 60s, it was very, very progressive. Kubitschek, who was the president, built Brasilia and places like that. Some of it was crazy. I mean, Brasilia was built in the middle of nowhere. And so some of the projects just didn't make sense, but it was a time of intense optimism, as it was in Britain, in those buildings like the Barbican Arts Centre, and excuse me, before it, the South Bank Centre, were emblematic of, let's say, a belief in democracy, a belief in the general spread of wealth, and very different from what we have now. It was a very different time. It's the time I grew up in as a young man, and that's the architecture that I experienced, and its loss is tragic in a way. But if we look at Lina's work, we'll see that. But we'll also see a designer with a very accurate sense of social projection and a wonderful eye a wonderful composition. Many of the buildings I've described in concrete are impressive, but when you are near them, like the South Bank, and after a while you get completely exhausted by their insistence on monumentality, and Lina managed to avoid that. Like all great architects, she was very subtle. Her mind works in lots of different ways. I say this looking at her work, not by having read about it. And she was concerned with reputation, as many of the architects of modernism were unconcerned with reputation. That seems strange in these times when architects such as Dr. Dumoulin and Paulo are very concerned with their own status. At that time, the work was the important thing. And I met Marcello Ferraz, who was her assistant and carried on making her furniture. And he said, they said, Lina, you should have a book made. And she said, when I'm dead. So, what a hero. See if I can work this. Great. Yes. This is, I'll show several publications that were issued by the Lina Bo Bardi Foundation. And if you can ever lay your hands on them, they're very beautiful. This is the introduction. The first project will be the Museum of Art in Sao Paulo. It's this one. When I saw it in photographs and it was explained to me by its enthusiasts of the great building, I thought, yeah, am I looking at it? And in fact, it is a building that you have to go and see. Its intention comes through in reality. And it's a monster in on Sao Paulo Boulevard. And this is a very early photograph which shows how it looked just after construction. And it's built over a road tunnel. Now, I'm sure there are other ways of making that structure than two columns in a very, very large span. I'm sure there were, Jane, are you photographing?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can you, everybody can sign a consent form to their images?
Sorry to tell you, you already signed it, but you didn't realise it.
Okay. I'll have to talk to my agent. Of course, there must have been another way to distribute the loan at columns, but this is a kind of bravura statement. And in a lot of Brazilian architecture at that time, you will find these very long span, very thin structures, and it's a statement of possibilities and optimism. And here's some drawings. I never normally show drawings. My lectures tend to be about sensuality of the building rather than its construction, but I will I'll try and explain it. Well, we can see that it's, I guess it's pointer. It's in two parts. There's two upper floors, and then a public plaza, and then spaces below. Something weird's happening. Sorry. So anybody with any technical knowledge can make this not be blue.
This is the escapes.
I really like that. I don't see it, so we want to do it. It's going to be great. If you're in my group, I'll give you an A. Right? No, you're not in my group.
No.
Click on that again. Did you say don't click on that again? Okay. I was going to point. I'm going to point with my finger. We do this old school. I'll try not to stand in front of the screen while I point. So the tunnel's under here, and there's a steep slope to a road. There are two floors here, a public plaza, and then two floors of galleries. And then these sections show the other way. That shows that in the first level there's a theater, and there's underneath it there's a sort of majestic staircase, double staircase. So that's all the architecture you can get. Now we're going to talk about what it's like. Oh man, good fun. Okay. So this is one. Yeah, this is below ground. This is minus 9.5. So there's a big civic wall, and then above it there's an auditorium. That's all in the lower two stories. And then in the upper stories, I will show you. Oh, well, forget that. We've seen the plan. All right, this is what it looks like. I mean, it's bulky, but it's also very elegant. You can see on the left one of those pairs of crossing staircases. And this is the image that's startling, because the collection for this gallery, I think, was in part donated by Bardi, and it's a fantastic collection. I mean, it's not some local finger painting, you know, it's historic Dutch painting and stuff like that. And Lina Bo Bardi, I'll go forward a slide. Lina Bo Bardi was experimenting with that you put these paintings between two pieces of glass with a piece of concrete underneath it. I mean, from conservationist point of view, it would give you heart failure. But and I don't know how she did it, because sunlight came in from both sides. But the aim of it was very interesting. Usually in an art space, and I'll show you what it was converted to. Usually in an art space, everything is discrete. You go from painting to painting. Here, you see all of the paintings together in the context of the city. I mean, this is some statement. But, oh, sorry, that's the back of it. Beautiful work. But this is what it was turned into eventually. It was air conditioned, and then the windows had screens put on. But I hear that it's been restored to its original form. I haven't seen it. These photographs are taken some time ago. And it's I'm just trying to show that the staircases and the way that you go through the building are important. You know, the picture of people is important. You know, it's most art spaces you go in, and quite justifiably you lose yourself in the art. Here, the people are aware of themselves. So because of her sense of the times of Brazil and the significance of the people of Brazil in its forward development. And there's a theater with a kind of strange detailing at the side. All of it's idiosyncratic, and some of it I don't understand, some of it I can explain to you. But then there's a restaurant. There's always a restaurant in Lina Bo Bardi's schemes, apart from one. And here's the furniture. You know, I mean, you wouldn't want to move that bench any time easily. It's got concrete leg and a Brazilian hardwood top. And then if you think that's strange, try this. You know, you have to get up very carefully, otherwise you're on your back. And she still makes it. I was tempted to buy one, but I thought, what if my mother sat in it? Anyway, just to talk about how this building is conceived in its location. On the opposite side of the street is a garden, as you can see, which looks like this. But what I think Nina understood was that because of that slope behind the building, there would always be daylight. There would always be daylight in this space. And it's desolate in a way. And it seems to confirm the suspicion we all have that these spaces for public assembly don't work. And Lina's drawings, she did beautiful drawings. Lina's drawings show a rather elegant possibility for it. But actually it's like this. It's used. So what would what I'll do is I'll walk you around it. I mean, it's apparently simple statement of galleries with a huge structure and a public space underneath it. But there's always, with Lina Bo Bardi's work, there's immense richness. So if we walk around it, you go down the hill, so you see it, you see that it's not really sitting on the street, you know, it's perched on a base. So, and then steep street. And then the other part of it becomes visible. And then you see that from this street, this part's in scale, a much different scale, you know, so it changes from being a boulevard building of some scale into one which is much smaller in a way. And then if you walk around it again, you see that there are moments where this has been considered, you know, it's probably worn, but I think they intended it to be rough. And they intended this to reveal its difference in relation to this. But what I want to say in the final slide here is that I imagine that when this building was built, there were none of these white buildings. So I'm imagining that. And they're crap, you know. I mean, like a lot of cities, they're just uninteresting, absolutely devoid of the kind of passion that we see in Bardi's building. But her building just sees them off, you know. So a building of some power and passion, if it doesn't get ripped down or changed, can have a position in the city of optimism. Another beautiful work from the Bo Bardi Foundation for the Teatro Oficina, which is the workshop theater. And again, this section, there's a tiny entrance here and then a huge building behind it, very tall in this part. So when you approach, it's very intimate. And you go in there, and then there's a box office on the street, very charming, buy your ticket. And you go inside this enormous place. All of the seats are on one side, and they're arranged in the scaffold. Now, scaffold is the most banal thing you could ever deal with, but somehow, through her willpower and ambition, she transforms it. It stops being some gesture of economy and becomes something else. The building, I suppose these elements like this and this were in the workshop, and I think it was a car motor fixing place, but they used them, and there was the theatre company that commissioned this were very similar to in their ideas to Peter Brook, the British theatre entrepreneur who always worked in buildings which existed, buildings of character. So he would do the Mahabharata for hours in a building which wasn't designed as a theatre, and there was there's a history of theatre that wanted to get out of theatre and use pre-existing buildings, and we see this also in the visual arts. There's a desire for artists sometimes to exhibit outside a gallery in a place which was made for a different purpose. So it has a window which may have been installed or may have been there, which has a platform, and one can imagine that they would act like this. And the whole of the, as I understand it, the action in this theatre is not frontal. The audience doesn't sit, you don't see them through a proscenium. They work up and down the room. They actually, so it's very, very active, and they would, I imagine, use this. You could imagine that they could do a lot with this, with the kind of theatre that they've done. It's very tall. Up in the eaves of the dressing rooms, you know, the makeup rooms, the wardrobe, all jammed up in the eaves, completely ad hoc. So it has a, and then there's a control room up there. So it's very dynamic. It looks like nothing, but it's full of something. And I think this might be the last part. This seems like it might be a very short lecture. The last one is with the SESC Pompéia. And the SESC is a particularly brilliant Brazilian institution, which is, as I understand it, it's a social entity supported by business. So in a SESC, you might have an art place, you can have a repair workshop, dentist. I mean, a really interesting mixture of things. And this is the plan. This was originally a factory, and it has a wall all the way around it, and has a way through here. And Lina Bo Bardi built that thing, and Lina Bo Bardi built that part of the new building there, which I'll show you. So she worked, the office of Lina Bo Bardi worked on the site, and there's a funny story, which is that each day they cooked a meal for the workers, which always consisted of beans. And they changed the beans, and a rumor went around that beans affected the masculinity of the workers, that they wouldn't eat. So Lina Bo Bardi had the bishop of Sao Paulo come and bless the bean to resolve the issue. So that's, if you're doing part 3, put that in there real quick. So you walk through everything that's incidental, like the signage matters. There's a cafe, and then a restaurant, another restaurant, self-service restaurant with a huge room full of people eating vigorously on unmovable furniture. And then a series of exhibition spaces. There's one of which I don't have a picture, which has a small river running through it, which I regret I didn't take. But so a series of exhibition spaces. And then what we see here is seating. And there's a library, there's a reading room here, where people read the newspaper, and then above it there are places for more private reading. So maybe it's not like that anymore. They also have dancing apparently in the night. It's a favorite of people meeting each other, I'm told. And then seats and more immovable seating. Seating that's so big that it's like a small room, and where people encounter each other and make friendships, and where it's shuffled off when it's not wanted, and the people who maintain the place sleep on it and chill out. You can see that you need a forklift to lift it, it's so heavy. Now we're in a room where some time ago facilities managers chosen these chairs, and perhaps in 10 years' time somebody else would choose some chairs which would be blue plastic or something like that. And Lina understood that. So if you make it indestructible, immovable, it will last a long time. The ethos of the place will not be affected. There's a cinema. This is the foyer of the cinema. The foyer of the cinema has a mesh screen between it and the street. So you go into the cinema foyer is usually going to a dark space, and then you prepare to enter the cinema. Here, you're, after having been in this interior, so to speak, suddenly you hear the street outside you, a kind of magic. And then in some of the rooms, there are places for education, and they're all surrounded by these cinder block walls where she's insisted that they didn't clean the water off. And you learn things like carpentry. And some of them are curved. And you can start to notice what's happening in the pavement here. So it's corny, but it's actually very beautiful. And I think that's what's so special about her. There's freedom to make gestures which are sentimental, and yet, because her artistic integrity was very high, they were. So, you know, paving does mean something. People do respond to it. Yes, it's a fire escape, but it's a place where people hang out because it invites that kind of use. And here's the pièce de résistance. It's the building that Lina made, and it's a multi-story sports building. So in the small building on the right has weight training rooms, and the one on the left has things like swimming pools and ball courts. And as you approach it, there's a boardwalk for sunbathing. So people go from Sao Paulo to sunbathe here, and there's a shower, beautiful shower. So it's a place in the city where people take their clothes off and take the sun. And then what do? You make a giant concrete building and make an entrance. You've got a red box on it. And it's got swimming pools. And then on top it's got a board court. And it has windows. Except they're not windows, they're openings. They're openings which actually, where the rain doesn't run in, it runs out. And, Marcello worked on this, said Lina asked them to do it, and they thought it was strange, but they did it because they trusted her. And it does, it's a very beautiful side in my estimation. But in the connection between the two buildings, you find yourself back in the city. It's the end of the lecture.